Today is a story that many of us have heard and witnessed in one way or another. So we were delighted when Catherine said she would come and talk about her mom and dad and her family. So please welcome Catherine Bodenbenders. I have to tell you too, Catherine's a nurse, so we go back a ways in the days.
Once a nurse, always a nurse.
There you go, once a nurse, always a nurse. Yeah.
I'm starting with a verse of scripture that came to mind as I started this project of looking through pictures and thinking about my dear parents. And it has guided this whole project. Psalm 19, verse 14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. I call this story, I've given it the title of An American Love Story. And I've given the subtitle of With Love, Anything is Possible. This story is about a beautiful young German woman, Katharina Kata, as she was known in her family and among her friends, ZSCHOCKE, and a handsome young German man, Heinrich Bodenbender. The foundations of this story comprise three elements. The first one being two God-fearing, closely knit families. Heinrich's family, father Georg, mother Ottilia Wagner, née Wagner, Johannes, Elizabeth, Anna, Matilda, Albert, Helena, Philip, Heinrich, Peter, Ottilia, Ernst, and I'll introduce them to you in this family picture. In this picture, you have father Georg and mother Ottilia, née Wagner in the middle. In the middle is the oldest son, Johannes. To his right, I'm telling you their names chronologically in terms of age. They were all about 2 years apart. To Johannes's right is Elizabeth, to his left is Anna, and then came Matilda, and on the far right in the top row is Albert. The second row left is Helena, and over on the extreme right is Philip. Then in front of Helena is Heinrich, and way over on the right is Peter, and on the bottom row on the left is Ottilia, and then the baby of the family, Ernst. The ZSCHOCKE family. Katharina's father, Reinhard Otto, her mother, Christina née Clay, her brothers, Hans, Kurt, and Arthur. Katharina, of course, came between Kurt and Arthur. And then their little baby sisters, Anna and Maria, who were born, Anna was born 14 years after Katharina, and Maria was born 16 years after Katharina. So they were really raised like two families because the older children, Hans, Kurt, Katharina, and Arthur, were all pretty close in age. This is a family, it isn't a family picture, it's a picture of a wedding. Which Katharina attended with her family. It was taken about 1912. And in the front row, the third person, I'm going to go over to the picture. I don't know if this pointer, yes, this pointer works, this works. This is Katharina's mother, Christina, her father, Otto, her brother Hans, her brother Kurt. Katharina is sitting on the lap of her grandmother, and this is her grandfather. and her brother Arthur is sitting on the lap of his mother, Christina. The little girls hadn't been born yet. This is Christina ZSCHOCKE, Kate's mother. And this is Reinhard Otto ZSCHOCKE, Kate's father. I really stress the importance of the families as a foundation for this story, because there was tremendous love of father for his family, and later for mother's family too, and for mother for her family. They loved their families deeply, and as we were talking about among the people at the table there a few moments ago, I can't imagine breaking away from such strong family bonds and such love to strike out and find a way in the new world, as our parents did. But father had goals. He had things he wanted to do, and I'll speak of that momentarily. The second foundational element was Heinrich's strong belief in, quote, America, das Land der unbegrenzten Möglichkeiten, end of quote. America, the land of boundless possibilities and opportunities. That concept was in front of him, and it drove him, and he saw America as a land of great freedom and a land where you had ideas and goals, and if you were willing to work hard, you could see them to their completion. And he wanted to go there. He wanted to go to America. The third foundational element were the qualities that Heinrich possessed. His vision, goals. He was very ambitious. He was driven. He was willing to work hard. He was determined. And he was persistent. Heinrich was committed to risking everything for a future in America with the woman of his dreams as his wife. Heinrich's and Kate's love story began in 1928 in Marburg on the Lahn River in Germany. Marburg was Kate's hometown. Heinrich was from near Weimar, and this was, and still is, a rural community about 5 miles from Marburg. I want to show you just a few pictures of Marburg. It's the most beautiful little town you can ever imagine. And Mother, up until she rose to her heavenly home, spoke of Marburg and longed to go back and see it again. This is Marburg with the Lahn River, the castle on the hill, the houses along the river. This is the University of Marburg, and really Marburg's defined by the fact that it has this tremendous university. In 2027, it will be 500 years old. It is one of the oldest universities in Germany, and at one time was the oldest Protestant university in Germany. It is now a public university. You see in the foreground the bridge, the Weidenhausen Brücke, the Weidenhausen Bridge, that leads into the district of Marburg where Kate lived, where she was born and where she was raised. The Weidenhausen district of Marburg is one of the oldest parts of the city. It goes back to the Middle Ages. It's very picturesque with the houses. Almost all the houses are attached one to the other. The half timber is characteristic of the houses, and the very narrow street. At the time that Heinrich and Kate met, Heinrich was 24 and Kate was 23. Heinrich had completed an apprenticeship to become a, quote, Bau- and Kunstschlosser, end of quote. And roughly translated, that would be that he was a building and artistic metal fabricator. He would do things, that type of trade involved making like ornamental gates railings for buildings, that type of thing. But there wasn't much call for that kind of work in the 1920s due to the economic conditions. Employment was very, very difficult. So Heinrich found employment traveling from town to town, servicing insurance policies, collecting premiums, and adding additional coverage to those premiums. And he did this via the motorcycle. He just traveled town to town doing this work on a motorcycle. At the time that Heinrich met Käthe, he had been cleared for immigration to America, and he was just awaiting his embarkation date, and he was ready to go. Käthe at that time was employed in the home of a prominent Marburg surgeon. Mother's background was that she had been trained to be a housekeeper and a cook. So in this home, she was a cook, and she also was entrusted with the care of the children. Heinrich and Käthe met at a masquerade ball. Now, they didn't have cameras, and we don't have a picture of the costumes. But over the years, we heard many, many descriptions. The picture on the left is a picture of the traditional type of attire for Germans in the Marburg region of Germany. The three women with the traditional attire and the man with the traditional attire. And we learned from our parents that father was dressed as the man in that picture is dressed. Mother's picture I found on the internet. By mother's description, she talked about having to be laced into the dress. But I'm sure it was a beautiful dress, and this one seems to kind of go along with mother's description. And of course, they had masks on. Well, Heinrich was completely captivated, and I want to say love at first sight relative to mother, by the beautiful little gypsy. Several dates followed that masquerade ball, and then Heinrich asked Käthe if he could meet her family. Well, mother thought that was a little strange. She hardly knew him. But she thought, well, why not? I mean, surely he's welcome in our home. I'll talk it over with my parents. And of course, they agreed. So Heinrich had dinner with the ZSCHOCKE family, and they were very compatible from the very first meeting. But one of the things he did at that dinner with the family was to speak of his plans to go to America. I think he was preparing them for what he wanted to ask them. And soon thereafter, Heinrich announced to Käthe his goals. This is what he wanted to do. He was going to go to America. He was going to find work, and he was going to be leaving pretty soon. He was going to find work, he was going to save his earnings, and he was going to send Käthe a ticket in 1 year to join him. Heinrich had found the woman with whom he wanted to build a life and a future in America. Well, what were Käthe's reactions to this? She was definitely interested in this handsome, ambitious, driven visionary, but she had some real questions, will he accomplish his goals? And furthermore, will he be the same person after he goes to a new place, a new land? Will he be the same person in a year that he is today? Well, at some level, mother must have believed that, yes, he probably was going to do exactly what he said, because she began to take evening classes to learn English. And shortly thereafter, then, Heinrich was off to America, and he sent, I found this among mother's papers, a postcard addressed to Käthe ZSCHOCKE from the North German Lloyd Bremen. Heinrich's destination in America was Kelowna, Iowa. He had an uncle here who was his sponsor. Uncle Andrew was a brother to his mother, and he had a farm. And Heinrich went there and he worked as a farmhand. But I think he realized very quickly that he wasn't going to be able to get the money together very quickly to make that ticket deadline of a year. So he went to the neighboring farm, which happened to be, Kelowna, Iowa is Amish country, we all know that. And the neighboring farm family was an Amish family by the name of Miller. And that name is spelled correctly. C-H-R-I-S-S was how Mr. Miller spelled his name. And he explained that he would like to supplement the income he was receiving at his uncle's farm by having some additional work. And did they have any work? And they said, well, you could chop wood. And so Father, in addition to working at his uncle's farm, chopped wood at the Chris Miller farm every day for $1 a day. By the way, he developed a lifelong friendship with this family. And some of you may have noticed that there was a contingent of Amish people at Mother's memorial service. We are very close to them to this day. Well, one day, Henry saw an advertisement for John Deere. And he kind of figured out, although Father wasn't completely fluent in English yet, that it had something to do with machinery and farm implements. So he asked his uncle, where is this John Deere? Uncle told him, and Henry went to Moline. Got on a train, went to Moline, found room and board, got a job at the John Deere foundry, and started saving his earnings. And yes, indeed, in 1 year, he had the ticket to send to Ketchup.
What did the ticket cost? Oh.
Good question. This is the receipt. This is the receipt of the ticket. And Mother came in class. She came second class. And this is a receipt that Henry sent to Ketchup. As you see at the top, Miss ZSCHOCKE. It said on the SS Bremen, but Mother came on the Europa. The ticket on the ship was $162.50 from Bremen to New York Harbor. And then there was railway fare of $37.14 from New York to Moline. And an $8 head tax, so it was $217.64. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it was then.
$10 a day.
Yes. This is the passenger list. I would love to have brought it today, but I don't want anything to happen to it. I keep it very safe. It's actually a booklet. And it's the passenger list for the Europa. This ship, the Europa's maiden voyage was March 19th of 1930. Mother's trip was May 6th, and she was supposed to be on the maiden voyage. We're really not sure why she wasn't, whether the papers weren't quite ready yet, but that was Father's intention, was that she would be on the maiden voyage. He wanted Mother to come in style. And the last page of the booklet's about 20 pages long, shows up at the top here, the last name is Fräulein Katharina Schocke. And Mother talked about what a lovely voyage it was. It was just beautiful. She made friends on the ship. Of course, when they got to New York Harbor, everybody went. They were all immigrants. They all went their separate ways. And this is a picture of the North German voyage Europa. Well, Katie arrived in Moline at the train station when it was still there for a joyous reunion with Henry. And she found out that Henry was the same Henry. Well, Mother, with those English lessons that she had in Germany, was able to read. And the first thing she did when she arrived in Moline was to get newspapers and start reading classified ads. And she saw a little box ad advertising a job cooking in a Moline home. And Mother thought, I can do that. I'm well prepared to do that. So she applied for the job. And she got the job. It was at Overlook, the DEERE WIMAN house. Now, Mother arrived, her ship left Bremen on the 6th of May. She arrived in New York on the 12th of May. She got the job within a week of arriving in Moline, and that was just on the cusp of summer. And the Wymans were getting ready to go to one of their summer homes, which happened to be in Watch Hill, Rhode Island. So here she was, just arriving. Father was working in the foundry at John Deere, and they were going to be separated again. But that was her job, and she went with the Wymans to Watch Hill. But Henry found a way to come visit her. And we have a few pictures of that visit there in Watch Hill while Mother was with the Wymans on their summer vacation. This Watch Hill Harbor on the Atlantic Ocean. And then she came back, of course, and these are just a few pictures of the recording days on the Wyman estate. I skipped one there. But then the Depression, and Father lost his job. He was laid off from his job. So what did he do? He, of course, continued to look for a job, but there weren't any. So he would come up to the Overlook where Mother was working in the kitchen and try to be of help in any way that he could be to Katie. And one day Mrs. Wyman came down to the kitchen. She needed to have some additional things added to the menu. They were expecting guests. So she asked Katie if she could come into the walk-in refrigerator with her and they could talk for a moment. She really wanted to know who that young man was. And so she said, who is the young man helping you, Katie? And Katie, of course, told Mrs. Wyman, he's my fiancé, but she was very concerned. She said, is it okay that he's here, Mrs. Wyman? And Mrs. Wyman said, of course, but where does he work? And Katie said, well, Mrs. Wyman, he works at DEERE Company. And Mother had no idea that she was working for the president of DEERE Company. And so Mrs. Wyman thought, well, she said, Katie, I think we could have a job for him here. She said, the houseman is retiring. Let me talk to him about that possibility. So Mother, Katie, and Henry talked it over. And Henry asked Katie, what does a houseman do? And Katie said, well, he sweeps the porches. He oversees all the daily chores that have to be done in the house and in the yards. Keeps the driveways orderly, the lawns orderly. And my father's reaction was, I don't want to be a houseman, Katie. And my mother's response was, Henry, it's a job. And he had to agree. Katie was right, it was a job. So he had an interview with Mrs. Wyman. And Mother made it a point to be in that part of the house when he had the interview with Mrs. Wyman. She kind of eavesdropped. She wanted to know how things were going. And she was so pleased. She said they just seemed to get on really, really well. And he was immediately hired as a houseman, but not for long. He was quickly promoted to a new position, Mr. Wyman's butler. And for this position, the Wymans took him to, or he was sent to Michigan Avenue in Chicago to be outfitted. So now here is Henry as Mr. Wyman's butler. Well, both Henry and Katie were working now, and came to the decision that, of course, they loved each other, and now was the time to get married, and they were married in Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Rock Island. At that time, Emmanuel had a German-speaking pastor, and they had German services, so that's where they had been going to church. Their first home was the apartment above Carriage House, a lovely 5-room apartment. One of their first priorities was to decide on a Lutheran church home, and I told the story in Echoes from the Past when Trinity was 100 years old, and how many years ago was that now? It was in 2007, I think. 2007. 2012, yeah. The story about how that happened, but they came to Trinity because it was within a walking distance. And they didn't have a car. It was very difficult to get down to Emmanuel and Rock Island. These are pictures of our parents as new parents. Father sitting on the porch there at Overlook with Reinhard in his lap and Mother helping him to walk. And these are just pictures from work, play, family. That's what they were involved with. Mother and father with their first child, Reinhard. And then the arrival of the second child, yours truly, happened in the same year as the visit of Father's parents. And this was really a big event for his parents to come from Germany. And you see his mother in the traditional Marburg folk attire. To see how their son was doing in this new country. And Mother really was very happy with their visit because she didn't know her in-laws, and she came to love them very much. She also, well, I won't get into the story. There's another little story connected with a cold that Mother had. She had a cold, and she sent Father down to the little mom and pop store, not too far from Overlook, to purchase some lemons because she wanted a hot drink to ease the raspiness of her throat, scratchiness of her throat. But he never came back. She got kind of worried. She thought, well, how long does it take to get some lemons? And finally he came back and he said, Katie, I think we're going to buy a store. And Mother said, what? So he began to explain that he had gotten into a long conversation with the owner of the store and he wanted to sell the store. And he said, I think we should buy that store. We can start a little business. And Mother said, well, who will run the store? And Henry said, you. And Mother said, me, Henry, I'm not trained to run a store. I know nothing about a business. And he said, you can learn. The gentleman who is selling the store said that he would stay 2 weeks and tell you everything you need to know. And then you can run the store. Well, they bought the store. 14th Street is just a couple, 14th Avenue and 10th Street, it's just down the street a little ways here. So this is, Mother is right sitting down here on the step with her little children, Reinhardt and Catherine, and Father's up here, and then of course his mother and his father. So this was their first store. Mother stayed in the store meeting the needs of the neighborhood people there 7 days a week. Father continued as a butler at WIMAN's, and our family continued to live in the Carriage House. But then Father had another vision. Let's build a store. And he could see that the only place to build would be south. He told Mother, he said, Moline can only expand to the south. Well, the south was outside the city limits. So they bought an old farm on 7th Street and 27th Avenue, and this is what it looked like when they purchased it. There was no city water. There was, the 27th Avenue was a dirt road. Sarah, this is interesting to you. Sarah's from this neighborhood. There were only 2 houses, Sarah. The one you can kind of see right here. And then there was one on 27th Avenue. Probably right next door, the Hall House, I think. Is that correct, Arthur? The Hall House. So there were two houses in that area. And this is the house here, and these were a lot of outbuildings, farm buildings in the back. Very primitive, very primitive. Mother said, I've worked in all these beautiful homes. She worked in this beautiful home in Marburg for the prominent surgeon, and then shortly before she came to America, she worked for a countess, an English countess, who was a great help in learning English. And then to come right into Overlook. And then I'm going to move where we don't even have water. It was a well. She said, Henry, we're going backwards. We're not going forward. And Henry said, it's okay. We're going to work together. It's all going to work out. And of course, they were a real team. So this is the foundation for the store. And I have no idea who these people are. I'm guessing that this might be Reinhardt, and this might be me. I don't know who this person is, and I'm not sure. That might have been the lady who owned the farmhouse before father and mother bought it. Well, during the move, mother and father welcomed their 3rd child, Arthur, who's here today.
Yes.
And so then there were 3, Reinhardt, Catherine, Arthur. And 6 years later, baby Andrew was welcomed. This is the store. You'll notice on the side here it says Katie's, grocery, poultry. We buy and sell chickens. My parents were always having to reinvent what they were doing because, you know, mom and pop stores were very busy for a while, and then the supermarkets came in. So they had to figure out something else, and they went into the sale of eggs and poultry. And where are they going to put all these?
Backyard.
In the backyard. So we had, this is a picture of Father with all the turkeys at Thanksgiving.
Oh, my.
Oh, my goodness.
They really, really worked hard. And I have to say, too, that, you know, my parents were a real team, and they taught us how to work. My oldest brother, I think, got the brunt of it, really. He says when he comes to visit during winter, he says he always thinks about the cold, cold winters of preparing poultry, the turkeys and the chickens, especially at Christmas time, when it was so, so cold. But I wanted to say, the other thing I wanted to say, they were a real team of work, but they had a lot of great friends that came alongside and helped too. This is the first family, formal family picture that we had ever had taken. I really like this picture. My father and mother look so beautiful.
Huh.
This is an important picture in our family because it marks an event that my parents had so been looking forward to. The first time that they could go back to their homeland and see their beloved parents. Mother's father died 6 months after she came to America, but her mother was still there. Her siblings were there, except for one brother who was killed in the Second World War in Russia. Father's father had died, but his mother was still there, and his siblings were there, as well as a brother who he had worked so hard to have released from a prisoner of war camp. And they wanted so much to take a trip and to bring their family so that we could know grandmothers, cousins, uncles, aunts. We had no concepts of those kinds of relationships. And so in 1949, we made that trip back to Germany, and that was kind of unusual for a family to make that kind of a trip at that time. we had to make it in several stages, you know, from New York, from here to Chicago, from Chicago to New York, from New York to London, from London to Frankfurt. And the other thing I want to say about this is that our parents talked about their families in Germany all the time. We loved them before we ever saw them because our parents told us so much about them. And as soon as they could make contact with them after the war, they sent care packages, not just once a week, they sent them every day. And they also sent to neighbors. In my father's village in Niederweimer, many packages were sent to neighbors. They were very hungry and they didn't have food, and they were so thrilled to get these packages of food. And when we went on this trip, our suitcases were filled with food. Very, very little clothing. I like this picture of us all together sitting on the store porch there. And I heard this phrase so many times, I just put that there. America's been good to us. This was another important event in our life when Mother's mother came here, so everything was full circle. Father's parents saw how their son was settled in America, and now Mother's mother was able to come here and see how everything was with her daughter and her family, and she spent 6 months with us. And we did not want to let her go. We just loved her to pieces, but she told us, "My children, I love you, I love you, I love you, but you can't transplant an old tree." The store underwent a lot of changes over the years. In 1960, Father enlarged the store. It's still there, and I just put a few pictures in here of our parents in the store. Father was a consummate salesman, and he was passionate about what he sold. And if you went into the store for whatever, a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, you left with whatever was his current passion. I mean, you leave with a jar of pickles or the greatest vegetables you could ever imagine, a canned vegetable. He was very proud of the bratwurst that he made, and my brother continues to make. But I love this picture because you can see the pride in his face. And Mother was a wonderful, wonderful person in the store. She was a listener. One of the people, the gentleman who taught Mother how to run a store on 10th Street and 14th Avenue told her, Mother said one of the most important lessons he taught me was listen to the customers. Because if you listen, then you'll know how to order your inventory. You'll know what they like and what they want. But I think Mother was just a natural listener, and people didn't only talk about their grocery needs to Mother, they talked about a lot of other things too. She was a very gracious listener. This was the last family picture, formal picture taken of our family in 1971. This is the last formal picture of our parents. It was taken in 1976, and it appeared in the Trinity Directory in 1976. The next year, on January 10th, 1977, at the age of 72, our father rose to his heavenly home. And 40 years later, 3 days before her 112th birthday, our mother rose to her heavenly home on Easter Sunday morning. In those many years between Daddy's homegoing and Mother's, she reflected much on her life, and one of the things that she said many times was, I've had a full, busy life. As I look back over my life, I can see that God has always been going before me and leading me. And I am so thankful. We, her children, are so thankful that mother and father both love the Lord, that mother followed him, that she came to America, that she married my father, our father, and that the two of them made a tremendous home for us in terms of deep, deep love. We never ever doubted that. We saw lives that were so committed to us, their children, and our goals. And they just sacrificed everything for us. And worked hard, wanted to be, they wanted to contribute, and they wanted us to be contributors to the community and to this great country. This is not the end of the story. This may be the gravestone at the burial site of our parents in Moline Memorial Park. But when Mother designed this stone after the death of our father, she selected two scriptures that tell the rest of the story. Thanks be to God, which giveth us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 15:57. Our lives are everlasting in the Lord. And die Liebe hört nimmer auf, 1 Corinthians 13:8, which translates, love never ends, 1 Corinthians 13:8. To which we, her children, say, Amen.
Amen.
And thanks be to God.
Oh, my goodness.